Hey y'all, Mechanical Mike checking in. What I'm going to do today is show you how to wire in a typical 15 amp outlet, 120 volt. And I'm going to also show you a couple tips and tricks to help streamline the process as you go. So what I'm going to start with before anything is my circuit tester or tick chaser, and just to make sure that that circuit isn't live. So this just measures the electromagnetic field coming off of it, and currently that's telling me there is power. So I'm gonna go flip the breaker, make sure that's turned off, and then we'll get started. So I've got my tool bag here. This is a typical tool bag I carry everywhere with me for when I'm doing electrical. It has pretty much everything I need. I've got my alignments. This is for cutting, and then these flat nose on the ends, nice for bending and whatever I need to do. And then I've got my wire strippers. These are great. I use them for everything. And they've got the needle nose plier on the end, so it's kind of a two-in-one deal. I'll put this back in there since I don't need it anymore. Got my razor blade. I can use that for stripping wires and such, but that one's already stripped, so I don't need to. That is something you need to do though. If this is sticking out and it's all yellow wire, what I'll do is I'll take my blade. So if this was all yellow wire, I would go here and I'd cut down the middle. Your ground wire's in the middle, so you don't have to usually risk cutting into either of the shielded wires. So if you cut down the middle of that and then you splice it back, then you peel it back and you cut off that excess in there. You want to cut it as far back in the box as you can. Once it comes into the box, you just want the wires. That's it. That's the knife. These are stripper crimpers. I use these mostly just for the crimping effect. I won't be using those today. Got a little torpedo level. That comes in handy a lot if you're like setting a box on the wall. You know, you want to set it on top of the box and mark it out so you know that you're cutting a level square out for that. This is usually just for accessing panels with that number 2 square bit. Got my Allen bits in here. Sometimes it calls for an Allen wrench. And of course my flathead and my Phillips screwdriver. Sometimes requires a crescent wrench. And I've got my channel locks right here. Tape measure, electric tape. So that's really everything I need is kind of compacted into this one box, and this is really nice. I just keep it in my truck and I use it all the time. Okay, so you want about 6 to 8 inches in your box. You definitely don't want to cut it too short so that if you ever needed to pull your outlet again and access it, you got enough length to be able to do that. And the way I do this, my rule of thumb is whatever side the wire is coming in from, it's coming in from this side, I bend it once and then I bend it twice, and that's usually about how much you're gonna want at maximum. And then I wind up going with a little bit less than that, but it actually winds up coming out pretty close to about that. So I take my bend. Typically, you know, your outlet is vertical. This one's sideways because we're working with a bar here, so we have limited space. So what I'm going to do is I want to bend them all together, and that allows kind of a springing motion. So if you pulled that out and pushed it in, it's real easy to stuff that much wire back into the box. Whereas in other cases, if you have it kind of twisted around, you're really kind of fighting that to fit enough wire in there, especially when you got multiple wires coming in. So keeping it clean is key. So now I'm going to take each of these, I'm going to bend them, you know, they're already bent half and half, and then I'm going to take this and halfway I'm going to bend it straight out. I'm going to do that same thing with my black and the same thing with my ground. I have another outlet over there that has 2 wires coming into it, and I'll show you how to properly tie 2 grounds together because your outlet only has 1 ground coming out of it. There's a couple ways to do that. There's a lot of variations, but I'll show you the way I do it. Okay, I've got my grounds, so I'm going to put a little bend and I'm going to cut that off. And now I'm going to pull that all the way out. Slide it on the end here, so scoot that all the way down the line, and then once I get to that other wire, I can start twisting it on there. And this is just going to give me a really nice connection between those 2 ground wires. Sometimes I'll take a nut and I'll twist it a little more than my hands can do, and that just ensures a good tight connection. And then it's going to come back I'm going to put a little bend coming straight out on that. Okay, so I've got these bent, and now what I'm going to do is I only need about 1 inch total, so I'm just going to cut off any excess. Like if these were longer, I would cut that off. So, and then I'm going to strip it back to about 3/4 of an inch. Of course, the ground's already stripped, so I don't need to worry about that. Okay. Usually, I'm thinking about this vertically, and I'm actually going to hold this vertically because that's probably how you're doing it. So that just gives you a good visual. All right, so I'm going to sort these wires the way that they're going to go onto the outlet. I'm going to put my ground on the left side, my white on the left side, black on the right. A good way that I remembered which side does the black go on, which side does the white go on, I go black gold, like oil. So black gold would be oil, so it's black to gold. And that's actually just, that's how I did it. You can do it however you want, but that association reminded me which was going to go on the gold side and which was going to go on the silver. So that means neutral to silver, and green, of course, goes to ground. So like any electrical setup, what you should do is always wire your ground first. And what I'm going to do is I want these, some outlets you can go where the wire just pushes straight in. I really don't like those very much because they're definitely prone to getting loose, especially if it heats up and cools down. So I always like to wrap my wire around the little screw there. And what I'm going to do, because there's only one wire coming into this outlet, is I'm going to go ahead and screw one of these all the way in on either side. Do the same thing on that side because we're not using both. If I had 2 wires, one coming in, one going out, I would use both and continue it down. But screwing those in also ensures that you're less likely to, when you push it back in the box, to have that wire touch a ground, or if this got stuffed in and this is sticking out, you're much less likely for that to arc. Now I want to twist this whichever way the screw turns, and in this case, because this is turning this way, it's on that side, and I'm going to be wrapping it like that. I want it to hook so that it's going with the threads as you screw in. That means it's less likely to push that wire out. Again, you can use the bender tool that comes with your wire strippers. Most of them have it, which is right here. So you just stick that in there, and then you bend it around. And you can actually clip that too, and then it clips it right. So no matter how far you stick it in there, it's going to cut it at the right length once you bend it. And you're going to have a perfect little hook. I just take this and I bend it in ever so slightly. I'm trying to do this so you can see it. But it comes down, curves back, and it actually goes in towards the outlet, and that really helps when you go to slide this on there. It really helps it just go in and catch that right in that notch. And if you really like to, make sure that's not going to come out. I just give that a little pinch, and I know that that's going to be set. I like to use a flathead. These screws can do both Phillips and flat. You're going to get a little more torque and a little tighter connection with a flathead screwdriver. Okay, my ground is connected. Next is going to be the neutral, and it's the same kind of thing. I'm going to twist with the direction that I will be screwing this in. When I go in, it just kind of slides in there, and that really saves you a lot of time because the way that just that little extra bend inward really helps you just get in there. And then I just took my pliers and I finished that off, so I got a nice good connection around that screw. And once again, I'm going to screw that in until we're snug. This is a part where you can definitely, sometimes if you're holding like this, if you don't push too hard, because there's a good chance you can slide off and punch your hand. Both our neutral and our ground tied in at this point. We're going to go ahead and tie in our hot, and this one, because we're on the other side, we're actually twisting that way, which is, clockwise on this, in this sense. So it's actually going to go get turned up and slightly in. Just hook on that real easily. Make sure you don't have too much wire stripped off that it sticks way out, or that you don't have insulated wire back to this point. I see a lot of people that strip their wire way back here, and you've got a hot coming in that's doesn't have its insulation way back at this point, you want it as close to that screw as you can, so that's real ideal right there. And it's most important, especially with your hot, because that's the one that's going to arc to a ground, or if you have a metal box, it can really get in there. All of my connections have been made. You can double check, make sure you're tight. And since we're sideways, I'm just going to put this back the way it was. And now if you look from above, you can see that bend I made. I made one bend and then two. And that kind of creates a spring behind this so that when I push it in, or push in and pull out without having to really fight that. And before I even screw these in, I'm going to push these in all the way to make sure that I'm not going to be fighting it. You can run into, like, if there's a little bit of a twist, you don't want to go in and have your outlet sit at an angle like that. You want it to be flush with your wall. So that's a good way you can make sure it's going to go in and it's going to sit flush. These have got a little bit of drywall mud in it, but no problem. This can overcome that. So I've got my Phillips head. Sometimes I use an impact driver or just a drill with a Phillips bit on this, number 2, to screw this in. And that works pretty well, and especially if you're doing a lot of outlets in a day, like you're doing a whole room, that's going to save you a lot of time to use a drill for this part, because it just, you know, they're long screws, they take a little bit of time. And you see right here, I'm holding it in against the wall. So you want to make sure those screws aren't, especially if there's resistance, you want to make sure those screws aren't pulling in against that, because there's definitely potential to strip that out because you're screwing into plastic. There's room to slide back and forth, so if the box isn't set quite level, then you can go in and adjust that a little bit so that it is level after the fact. See how I can move this back and forth? I got that play. And that's a good place where this could come in handy, your torpedo level, because I can set this on both of those and I can move it until it sits level, if you really want to get nitpicky about it. Most people, you can just eyeball it and nobody's ever going to know the difference. But if you do want to take it very seriously, you could do something like that, and then you tighten it down level. I'm going to turn the breaker back on, and then I'm going to test it once more with this and make sure we're good to go. Breaker's on. Cross our fingers. There we go. That's it. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe and ask any questions.